good morning, everybody based in Europe, and good afternoon, everybody based in Asia. Welcome to the side event. We're just waiting a couple of minutes for people to join, and then we'll start shortly. Okay, let's start. So once again, good morning, everybody who's based in Europe, and good afternoon to all colleagues joining from Asia. Thank you very much for joining us to the side event today. I specifically want to thank Australia for organizing this event, as well as the governments of Indonesia and the Philippines and the Bali Process Regional Support Office for their support. Over the next 50 minutes, we will explore the role of critical technologies in organized crime in Southeast Asia, looking specifically at the impact across the region and beyond. My name is Christina Ammerhausen. I'm a senior analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and I will be your moderator during this event. Given that we only have 50 minutes, let's jump right in. So first, I would like to hand over to Bryony Whitworth, who's the Director of the Cybercrime and Tech in the Multilateral Engagement section in the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs of Trade. She will provide us with some opening remarks for this event. Bryony, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Christina, for that introduction. I am incredibly honoured to be here today, and I want to also extend my very sincere thanks to Indonesia, to the Philippines, to the Global Initiative Against Transnational and Organised Crime, and the Regional Support Office of the Bali Process to support us in hosting this event with Australia. As you mentioned, I am a long-standing advocate when it comes to combating cybercrime in particular, particularly at the moment in my role heading delegation and as vice chair to the Cybercrime Convention negotiations. So I do have a very particular interest in this field. And Australia in particular and our Asia Pacific region does face a much considered and worsening cyber-enabled organised crime landscape. This is characterised by expanding threats, low barriers to entry, and increasingly resourceful actors. We're seeing the modes and the methods of cyber and technology-enabled crime relentlessly evolving. The significant access to sophisticated tools, things like cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, natural language processing software, social media, encryption, the dark web, anonymizing technologies. These are being used by organized criminal actors in a way that adapts and evolves their techniques rapidly and is very difficult for law enforcement to keep up with. But Australia does remain committed to working with our international partners to prevent, detect, investigate and prosecute those who are partaking in organised criminal activity, particularly online and through cyber and technology-enabled means, wherever they may be located. And we're also very strongly recognising that people engage with technology and with criminal justice issues in very different ways. So Australia's efforts to continue and will continue to consider gender equality, disability and social inclusion in all the ways that we try and combat these crimes. Strengthening our capacity to combat cyber-enabled organised crime, both at home and overseas, we consider enhances our region's collective security and resilience. The Indo-Pacific and Southeast Asia remain particularly vulnerable to the threat posed by cyber-enabled organised criminals who look to exploit gaps in our region's legislative, policy, law enforcement and technical capacity. As I mentioned, I have spent the last 2 years very long and difficult negotiations for a new UN convention to combat cybercrime. with the honour, though sometimes I think it might have been a punishment, of serving as vice chair and chairing several chapters of the convention, including on law enforcement, investigative techniques, and also on international cooperation mechanisms. And this is why I'm particularly delighted that Australia is able to support projects like this one that emphasise that transnational is not only a descriptor of the criminal activity, but it is also the best solution. It's through international cooperation that we can address these threats. I'm very keen to hear from the experts today from a wide range of backgrounds and sectors on this project, and particularly on how transnational organised crime groups are capitalising on vulnerabilities in critical technologies that is designed for legitimate, non-criminal purposes, such as gaming, financing, transfers, social networking, and capitalising on these vulnerabilities in their criminal organisations. And most importantly, on the recommendations and findings of this project, because I do consider that it is key for us to understand the threat landscape intimately if we're able to effectively support national and regional law enforcement efforts to combat the use of technology by organised criminal groups. Our number one priority for Australia in our international cyber engagement is to deliver sustainable and shared cyber resilience across our region and the globe. I want to thank you for having me here today to set the scene, and I look very forward to hearing from the experts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bryony, for these great opening remarks and for outlining Australia's work and approach to address the nexus on cybercrime and critical technology, specifically also in Southeast Asia. As we know, Southeast Asia is one of the most dynamic regions in this world, and its economies are innovative and quickly developing, also due to significant investments in critical technologies such as AI, cryptocurrencies, and the Internet of Things. And the region's potential is really significant, and we see this confirmed every day, including by recent investments of global companies into the AI infrastructure across the region. But in your opening remarks, you also underlined that this fast-paced environment exposes the region to significant vulnerabilities in a diverse range of cyber-enabled and cyber-dependent crimes, be they fraud, phishing, DDoS, or ransom attacks. And many of these are not only enabled or facilitated by critical technologies, but actually wouldn't exist. And so I also very quickly wanted to use my position as the moderator of this event to share some of the findings of the project that you've already mentioned and that we kicked off last year with your support that looked at the nexus between critical tech and organized crime in Southeast Asia. And we implemented this project, as I said, with the support of DFAT and in collaboration with Lydecker, an Australian-based consultancy, and specifically looked at how critical tech, including AI, cryptocurrencies, the Internet of Things, and cybersecurity, but also social media, is being used and misused by criminal groups operating across the region. And we found that all of these technologies are widely exploited and used by criminal groups. I will not get into the details of how this looks, as we'll shortly hear case studies from our speakers on this, but I wanted to mention that one type of crime really stood out in our work, and that is fraud. In fact, all the technologies that we looked at are used and misused in one form or another to conduct a diverse type of scams. So, for example, people from across the region are defrauded to invest in fake cryptocurrency, or crypto is stolen by criminals, or cryptocurrency is used to launder illicit proceeds. Frauds and scams are observed to become more efficient and harder to detect when AI and natural language processing is used by scammers, as they're better able to adapt to local language requirements or create deep fake pictures. Scams are advertised on social media, including in the form of fraudulent job offers. Data is stolen via IoT devices that then can be used to further scam victims. And given the limited cybersecurity across the region, there are widespread accounts of data breaches. And the topic of frauds and scams has become a significant issue across Southeast Asia for the past 2 years, as so-called cyber scam operations have attracted increased local as well as international attention. With hundreds of thousands of people being reported to be trafficked and exploited for forced criminality across the region, and billions of dollars reportedly lost in these scams, the cyber scams operations have also clearly shown that the somewhat online and faraway concepts have often real and direct impact on societies and economies across the region and beyond. But the cyber scams phenomenon has also created new opportunities for response and engagement on these issues, and on issues related to organized crime and critical technologies more generally going forward. And so as part of the aforementioned project, we were able to bring together a high number of stakeholders from civil society, the private sector, and government, not only to discuss the risks that they are confronted with, but also to gather good practices of response. And we will also hear from our panelists today what some of these responses look like in the Philippines, Malaysia, and Singapore from a government, private sector, and civil society perspective, respectively. And I just quickly wanted to mention 3 key takeaways from our side that were continuously highlighted and ran like a red thread through our work. The first one is really to underline the diversity of Southeast Asia. Whilst the countries of the region appear to face similar threats, they seem to be at very different levels in terms of their responses to cybercrime. The project has shown that regional harmonized approaches could have a real impact in terms of leveling up countries' responses, providing an effective platform for collaboration and law enforcement action. Furthermore, all stakeholders that we consulted with stressed the need for more coordination and engagement across countries and across sectors, as well as a platform to share experiences and good practices. The second point relates to the role of the private sector, both as a criminal actor as well as a source of resilience. There's a need to better understand the role of the private sector and who the private sector actually consists of. It's such a diverse community with such vast potential, and we're still far from understanding how to streamline engagement with the private sector in our organized crime responses. And the final point I wanted to raise is the fast-paced environment in which we live and the fact that technologies are progressing extremely quickly. It almost feels like we're always lagging 1, 2, or 3 steps behind in our response. However, the consultations also pointed to the opportunity that this creates, that we can use technology for good. And there's a need to better future-proof regulation and engagement and think ahead. And this project has really provided an excellent platform to do so. I just want to quickly mention one last point, and that's that we're about to publish a policy brief that provides with that outlines some more details on organized crime and critical technologies. And we are also discussing the findings of this project in 2 podcasts, and I will put the link to the podcasts. They're already out in the chat, so you can access it. But enough from me now. I would really like to hand over to our speakers now and look at some more detailed case studies from across the region. I also want to say to our participants here, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section. And if we have time later, we will try and get back to you on those. So first, I would like to hand over to Jehan Septiano, who is an investigator at the Directorate of Cybercrime Investigation of the Indonesian National Police. Jehan has more than 7 years of experience in handling cybercrime and will share a recent case study from his work. Thank you, Jehan, really very much for joining us here today. And without further ado, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the time. And talk about the cyber crimes growing in Southeast Asia is very interesting because there is something new that we can share and talk every day, every single day. And today we'll talk. I'll talk and share about the growing scourge of IT crime in Asia, like most like scam, fraud, and strategies for a safer digital future. Today we know that information and communication technology, or ICT, has revolutionized our lives, but it has also opened a Pandora box of the criminal opportunities. Southeast Asia, with its booming digital landscape and growing internet user base, has become a prime target for the IT-enabled crime, encompassing a vast array of scams and fraudulent activities as well. These crimes not only inflict financial losses on individuals and businesses, but also erode trust in online interaction, stifle economic growth, and pose a threat to regional stability. We know that this crime always evolving day by day, and we need to know about the evolving threats from this crime as well. First, in my region in Indonesia, scam or fraud is the one of the biggest crime every year. Every single year, this scam will be the number one crime. And so that I will share about the method that we find and identify from each cases. First is sophistication in social engineering. The criminal right now, they enhance the skill of social engineering. They utilize many tools and even the online tools they find freely on the web on the surface web, and then they weaponization the tools of deepfakes. They also growing the metamorphosis of the malware, so that the malware continues involve. We know the ransomware is the one of the global concern. Indonesia be a victim of this type of crime as well. But we know now they try to develop the variant of the encrypting system by the ransomware itself. And then for the emerging the battleground, as an Asian nation ramp up their digital economies and embrace smart technology, the cyber criminal are setting their sight on critical infrastructure like power grids, financial system, and transportation network. And then uh, this attack can have a devastating ripple effect, disrupting essential services and causing widespread economic damage, as well with the other method like preying on the vulnerability and supply chain attack. And while scam and fraud are prominent concern, the spectrum of IT crime in Asia is broader. Ransomware attack that cripple critical infrastructure and the data breaches exposing sensitive information are growing threats. Additionally, cryptocurrencies are increasingly used to launder the money obtained through the cybercrime. These things make it harder to track and hard to recover the stolen funds. So, while scam and fraud are dominant concern, the IT crime landscape in Asia is far more extensive. First, let's say like a ransomware rampage, and then the data breaches, and the most newest launder method is a cryptocurrency conundrum. And then when the financial losses stemming for the IT crime are staggering, but the true impact extends far beyond stolen money. Businesses targeted by the cyber attacks face not only financial losses, but also reputational damage as a customer lost their trust in the wake of the data breaches or the service disruption. The disruption of the critical infrastructure caused by the cyber attacks can ripple entire economies, hindering productivity and stalling growth. Moreover, victims of the IT crime often experience significant emotional distress, including feelings of betrayal, helplessness, and even anxiety. And combating the ever-evolving threat of IT crime require a multi-pronged approach that combines approach measure with reactive responses. Here's how Asian Asia and especially Indonesia can work together to build a more secure digital future. We can do like involving enhancing and developing a public awareness campaign, like Katarina said, that there are many people try to sharing education by a podcast. We do a podcast in Indonesia as well. We utilizing a YouTube channel to spread newest trends of crime, how to prevent, how to dealing with them, and something so on. we utilizing many social media platform, and then we can fortifying the ICT infrastructure, and then we can strengthening legal framework, building a skilled workforce, enhancing a public-private partnership. The last one is fostering international cooperation. And by implementing this measure, Asian nations may create a more secure digital environment, fostering trust, promoting economic growth, and protecting their citizens from the ever-present danger of IT crime. The fight against cybercrime requires continuous vigilance, adaptations, and a collaborative effort from all stakeholders. And by working together, ASEAN can create a safer and more prosperous digital future for its citizens. I think that's from me, and I open for any discussion or question. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Jehan, for sharing your insights specifically on ransomware attacks and also talking about the impact it had on Indonesia, as well as the response. And if you have a link to the podcast that you also didn't mention, then please feel free to also share that in the chat with all participants and speakers. We would love to have a look and listen in. I would now like to hand over to Ryan Winch, the manager of the Transnational Crime and Technology Program at the Bali Process Regional Support Office. He will share recent findings from research on the role of social media in enabling and driving cyber scam operations across the region. So also to thank you very much, Ryan, for joining this event today, and over to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much, Christina. And yeah, thanks to all the co-panelists and certainly Australia and the other co-sponsors, organizers of the event. I will just begin here by sharing my screen. It should be. The right one?
Perfect. Yeah, works.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I will try and be as concise with this as possible. It's certainly a large issue we're going to dig into here. And I will also try and stay within the band of social media. But yeah, as Christina said, I'm Ryan Winch, the program manager for transnational crime and technology at the Regional Support Office of the Bali Process. And I'm going to look a little bit today into the issue around cyber scam centers, largely centered in Southeast Asia, and in particular, how organized crime is using social media to facilitate their operations and to facilitate trafficking in persons. So just briefly, for those of you who aren't up on this issue, what we've seen is the explosion, particularly in Southeast Asia, of cyber scam centers. And it's a model where largely, or in most cyber scam centers, large numbers of victims of trafficking are being forced, often under threats of violence or other reprisals, to commit fraud and scamming at a massive scale. So across several countries in Southeast Asia, we're seeing tens of billions of dollars of profit. Often, and I think this is also where you see the convergence of many of these critical technologies, where cryptocurrencies are being used to facilitate the fraud, to launder the money. The trafficking in persons is being facilitated through social media. And now you also see the scams themselves being driven or, say, made more efficient or effective using AI and artificial intelligence as well. So it really is a convergence of technologies that's allowing these massive scam centers to grow. So you can see here just on the RSO's overview map, what a global issue this is as well. So all the dark blue countries are the places where we've seen reports of trafficking victims being trafficked from into Southeast Asia's cyber scam centers. And the red circles as well indicate, they're not to scale necessarily, but indicating where these scam centers are located. And you'll also note they are scattered around the world, and we're seeing small reports of a similar modus operandi being used in other regions of the world, which I think is quite alarming given how effective it's been shown to be. and the wide range of countries we're now seeing reports of scam centers being operated in. Specific to social media, I just have a few screenshots here that illustrate how trafficking is facilitated using social media. So whether it is a job ad, a fraudulent job ad being posted to Facebook, or some of these other ads being posted to various job search pages, or even through people's Instagram feeds or personal social media pages. You can see here just the range of ways these ads can look and the places they might be distributed on social media. You can see in English, Chinese, and Indonesian, just as a few examples here. But they're really often advertising relatively high wages, often for jobs related to customer service or in the tech sector, but also for a wider range of jobs, and often really focusing on the underemployed and those really looking for a job, say in the tech sector, who have maybe finished university and haven't found the position they're looking for quite yet. So when an individual would take these job ads or respond to these job ads, they'll be interviewed and then directed to either a transit hub or instructed on how to reach one of these scamming facilities. And once they enter, they're often surrounded by barbed wire, armed guards, that sort of thing. They're unable to leave and forced to scam for significant periods. What the concern is here in particular is the lack of content moderation. So a lot of these ads have been able to stay on social media platforms for weeks, months, or on some platforms indefinitely. And in some cases, even after having been flagged by law enforcement or NGOs as being potentially harmful or tied to trafficking, these ads have really continued to be posted and been able to remain online at scale, allowing the trafficking to continue. Perhaps even more alarmingly is particularly what we can see here taking place on Telegram. So what you have on Telegram in particular is groups, some of which have tens of thousands of members, and where there's no barriers to entry. So these groups are totally in the open. You often don't even have to actually join them to read through this content and see what's taking place. But on the left, you have a group with 50,000 subscribers where personal data is being bought and sold to facilitate scams. On the right, you actually have a job ad here for, say, management in a scam center. They're looking for someone to run some of these operations. And in the middle, I think most alarmingly, you're seeing people in a public Telegram group being bought and sold, being described based on the quality of their scamming, the languages they speak, their ethnicity or say passport, citizenship status, and being just openly bought and sold. So these are just 3 screenshots, but we also have significant amounts of evidence that this is all occurring at much greater scales than what we're seeing here as well, and entirely without moderation or any evidence that these groups are being regularly taken down. And just the other bullets here, we have evidence of organ trafficking and significant evidence of money laundering through Telegram. These really touch every aspect of a scam center's operation. So while some of these channels aren't scam center specific, what you have is links between these channels that can really facilitate every aspect of a scam center's operation or the operations of an organized crime group. So these pages will link between a money laundering channel, a human trafficking channel, a channel selling scamming scripts, and they all link back and tie together when you map them out and understand the broader ecosystem. So really what you have is organized crime using Telegram at scale to facilitate all the online elements of their operations, and really almost no evidence that this is being moderated or that there's any real response from the platform itself. And so just to wrap up here briefly, because I think there are a number of ways that go beyond what I have here on the screen in terms of response. But I think we need to begin discussions about what minimum standards for content moderation should look like and where liability lies with these platforms when crimes like trafficking in person are taking place openly at scale with no evidence of moderation. Ideally, these would be global standards, although certainly I understand the challenges there. But we also need to work with social media companies, encourage larger safety teams, more proactive post removal by platforms, but also efforts by governments to support one another, to support international organizations like my own, to bring less engaged platforms to the table, to have these conversations. Some of the large tech actors really do show up consistently, but when there's other platforms, smaller ones or more regionalized ones not joining the conversations, they become really susceptible to being abused by organized crime. And then also there's the law enforcement side. We need greater open source intelligence and social media intelligence capacity building for law enforcement. We also need to make sure that they have the human and financial resources they need within law enforcement to actually be locating this evidence and using it to support investigations into these organized crime networks. Often we do see these skills in cybercrime departments, in regional law enforcement agencies, but these skills are also needed, say, in human trafficking departments and outside of a dedicated cybercrime team. So those really, say, investigating trafficking for criminality, as the example we're using here, have the time and space to gather, what are the really substantial amounts of evidence available on these platforms right now. So I know that's a really quick overview of these. I probably also still went over my time a little bit, but I really do encourage anyone to reach out. My email's here. Would really, enjoy continuing this conversation with anyone interested. So back to you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and thanks for sharing really these fascinating insights into what's happening on social media and how open it is what is happening. And you also again underlined a very important point that it's not just one technology or one platform that is being used, but it's really a range of technologies and social media applications that we're talking about here. And that's also what makes the response so incredibly challenging. So thank you again for providing these insights. Now I would like to turn more towards discussing the responses that are currently in place, how they look like, the challenges and opportunities for the way forward. And for that, from a government perspective, I would first like to hand over to Angela Veria, or Lito, who's the president of the Philippine Computer Emergency Response Team. And he has a wide range of experience on issues such as information security, disaster recovery, and business continuity and planning. And yeah, so Lito, thank you very much for joining us here today, and over to you in the Philippines. You're still on mute.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Christina. Good afternoon here in the Philippines, everybody. Okay, I've been involved on addressing cybercrime with our Philippine National Police, and the greater challenge is really how to address cybercrime and transnational organized crime are enabled by technology. Are cases like, for example, human trafficking. Our latest case, for example, we've found Filipino workers in the likes of Myanmar working in. They are lured into working in other places like Myanmar and maybe Cambodia, but they end up or they're lured to work there for call center operations, but they are actually running scam operations, for example. It's hard to trace where the sources are when transactions, like in gathering electronic evidence, so that we can trace the source of these crimes. Right. There's also a challenge of case buildup, gather electronic evidence from various sources. So, for example, during the COVID period, there was a surge in scams and fraud. through mobile phones and other electronic devices. We're able to identify, for example, the source on electronic devices, but then again, we have the operators. When we get to the banks and when transfer of money, then we get challenges in the bank because of our bank secrecy laws. So it's it's a challenge for our cybercrime investigators to push through with the investigation, put together pieces of evidence so that we can address those scams. Similarly, for human trafficking and even drug operations, that's a big challenge. The country is very porous, so illegal trade in illegal drugs, even wildlife trade. This is simply the country is very porous, so that transnational organized crime dealing in these kinds of items is very hard to address. So what we do need, what I see that is needed is really capacity building, more capacity building, and addressing technology-enabled transnational organized crime, capacitating our law enforcement, and continuous education, even in the coming up with our law enforcement, the supply for our law enforcement. There is also a need to strengthen international cooperation and collaboration with other law enforcement agencies, because it's transnational organized crime operators really exploit the gaps between laws between jurisdictions, between countries. So there are gaps that need to be addressed as well. So that's just some of my responses to the discussion that's put on the table.
Thank you very much, Lito, for these insightful remarks, and for also starting to outline how multifaceted a response needs to be if we are trying to address this. Now to hand over to Dr. Prakash Christiansen, who works with the private sector. Prakash is the CEO of Wolfson X Corp and the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Airtrix Intelligence. He focuses on AI technology innovation and to revolutionize automation and surveillance and security in the manufacturing and service industry. So Prakash, thank you very much for joining us here today. Over to you.
Thank you, Christina. Well, I'll try to make it fast because being time cautious, but I've prepared some slides in response to whatever we have spoke, but it seems like all of us on the same page when it comes to the threats or the cyber or the crime that we are looking at right now. So I presume that you guys can see my slide.
Yes, it works.
Yep. Okay. So this is a little bit about myself. Normally, I'm focusing more on cybersecurity, specifically on the threat intelligence, specifically in the ASEAN level, simply because these are something that has not been focused very much, because most of the threat intel that we base or we use that as a baseline is very much into the European and the Americas. But there's a lot of lacking in the ASEAN perspective because this intel has not been developed. So this is where my focus area are. Let me just quickly jump into the area of my response, right? So these 4 topics is always been the talk of the town. Wherever we go, wherever any conference that we speak, right? Everybody speak about the cryptocurrency. Everybody speaks about AI, the NLP and the social media. But how are these actually correlate to the physical crime, or how these criminal activities are actually using these enabling technologies, right? Because the cryptocurrency, yeah, is a big topic. We know for the fact that it is used to enable the decentralization, right? But again, this same technology is also enabling to mine and also to use this technology to do the transaction. And of course, if we talk about Malaysia, we even have some laws where we can actually prosecute those people who misuse this cryptocurrency. For an example, in the recent days, there was a successful prosecution on a person who was selling this leak of data in the dark web, and they actually trailed them back to when the money actually back to Malaysia. But the fact is this, right? What happens if this money goes to another country? Does the global or the ASEAN level organizations are ready to actually take action when this money and there's the evidence that these exchanges are accepting money from criminal activity? So this is something food for thought, right? Of course, I don't have answer for that, but I know for the fact that if in the local country, we do have local legislation, but what if this money are landed in a foreign organization or foreign country? It's something for us to think about. The secondly is on the AI. So now this is again huge investments, huge topics are spoken in the governmental level, where private organizations like us are being impacted, right? Because we are forced to embark on an AI journey as well. Yes, as a private organization, we are also embarking on a huge AI leap where we use past data, past threat intel data, and use this AI engine for us to do preventive or I would say predictive analysis. Yeah, of course, it's all again on how we train this AI engine and what kind of output we want to look at. But it's probably again very preliminary for us to see what the AI is going to behave in the cyber world when it comes to past records and past criminal activity which use enabling technologies. On the NLP, very interestingly, cyber criminals or the scammers use this in a very creative way of crafting those attack or the scam activity, because they use AI to understand the behavior. For an example, in China, those AI cameras with the AI features can actually identify the reaction of the faces. So that are used for security, right? But again, the same technology can be also used to perform criminal activities, whether they're smiling, whether they're angry, whether they're sleepy, or the behavior, right? Because these are what we call as enabling technology used for criminal activity. And lastly, on the social media, just want to delve a bit deeper on this. This has been in a rogue mode now because advertisements are being done in a very creative way for them to launch these attacks on those victims. So again, what I'm trying to say here is the awareness could be one of the areas that is important. Now, what is the exact response? So where do I see those responses are? Advocating the regional cooperation among the law enforcement agencies, government and private organization. Because now if you see the government, as I said in my other previous conferences also, that government can't do this alone. There must be a need for private collaboration. That's why I say that there must be a common platform for decision making. So this decision making, what I'm saying is compile and conclude and consolidate data from everywhere, and this engine will give decisions whether is there going to be a potential threats or potential crime may happen. So this potential collaboration is very important, right? And of course, this joint sharing platform for investigation. Yes, among the authorities, I presume there are some level of collaboration, but from a perspective of evidence-based investigation, I believe that the private sectors can also provide some intelligence for the decisions to take place. And on the laws, I think every country is striving hard to create laws. Even in Malaysia, for an example, we have come up with our cybersecurity bill, but it took us some time for us to come up with the bill, but the bill is out now. But the long way to go, because this bill need to be really focused on many aspects and how this prosecution can take place, right? And obviously promoting the cyber security awareness, like everybody say, but it's more focusing on the population instead of a target. So population-based awareness is more important than the individual-based awareness, because population-based awareness is more like targeted to certain type of people. And lastly, My last slide will be the collaborative and decision-making platform for preventive and anticipation system need to be developed. This could be done in the global scale, in the combination of private sector authorities, or even collaboration activity towards the community-based ecosystem. With that, this is my contact details, and thank you so much for listening. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer them. And I hope I was within the time given, Christina.
Thank you very much, Prakash, and thanks really for providing insights on the crucial role of the private sector, and also for underlining that we're really talking about a transnational issue here, highlighting again the need also for a transnational or even global response to technologies and cybercrime, and a global platform to discuss these topics. And I think that actually links really well to our last speaker and her work. So I'd like to give the floor now to Helena Huang. Helena is an Associate Research Fellow with the Executive Deputy Chairman's Office at RSIS Singapore, and has done a lot of work on the UN Cybercrime Convention and negotiations. And she will speak about the role of civil society, ASEAN's role in this, and how she sees the process moving forward. So thank you very much for joining, Helena, and over to you.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, so I'm aware of the time constraints, so I will make it quick. I think it's clear from the opening and from the presentations that cybercrimes are actually diverse. And there's a huge range of issues that we are facing when we try to tackle cybercrime. In ASEAN and the Southeast Asia region, I would say that there are two key issues. The first is that there's no common working definition of cybercrime and what it constitutes. Some countries have cybercrime laws, and others would depend on generic cybersecurity or use of computer acts for prosecution. And the second thing that we need to keep in mind when it comes to discussing cybercrime in ASEAN is the diversity of the countries involved. So in ASEAN, there are 10 different countries, and not all countries are at the same stage and ready to tackle cyber and transnational crime at the same pace. So different countries have different priorities, and they all have limited resources. So resources are directed to what is more important and what's higher in priority. So this actually brings me to my next point, which is how the UN cybercrime can be a point of reference for countries in ASEAN. So almost all countries in Southeast Asia are involved in the negotiations, and that would mean that they have already developed and they're aware of their baselines. This means that these Southeast Asia countries can then take these baselines to collaborate with one another. Even if we look at issues such as ensuring the integrity of critical information infrastructures, like what Jehan mentioned earlier, that's actually an excellent starting point for ASEAN to collaborate on, because not every country have the same definitions and industries that's categorized as a critical information infrastructure. But with projects such as the ASEAN Power Grid, you have something that is common across all ASEAN countries. And this can be a good starting point for countries to then discuss how they can secure a particular infrastructure that is seen as that's common across all countries, to ensure that it is safe and unlikely to be compromised. So what's really next for the region, I would say, is to find ways to work together, how to find ways to collaborate together and to learn from one another. So the launch of the ASEAN CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team, is actually an excellent, another excellent starting point for them, because there is a way for ASEAN countries to then respond to not just the cybersecurity issues and cybercrime issues within their own countries, but together as a region, as they learn from one another and they build on each other's capabilities. So in this way, ASEAN countries can actually use what has been negotiated in the Cybercrime Convention as a working baseline, and then on top of it, look at the kind of context within ASEAN and to build and uplift one another.
Thank you. Continue, please. Okay, well, thank you very much, Helena. And you've really stopped at 8:50. So thanks also for keeping in the time. And sorry that we ran out of time here. I think there's such a diverse range of topics and angles that we could take and points that we could discuss. We could stay here for much, much longer. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. So a big thank you again to all speakers and panelists for joining us here today and sharing your insights. Thank you to all participants as well for joining us at this online CCPCJ side event. And a big thank you again to Australia for organizing this event, as well as to the governments of Indonesia and the Philippines and the Bali Process RSO for their support. So we will close the session now, but to all participants, please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any further questions. And we look forward to staying connected. Thank you again and goodbye.